People who did something in Vegas that did not stay in Vegas. What happened? Story 1. My friend had been dating this guy for 5 years, and she was convinced he was going to propose during our group Vegas trip. He was acting super weird, sneaky phone calls, dodging questions, clearly nervous. We all assumed a grand romantic gesture was coming. On our last night, we were at this piano bar where they let guests do little open mic moments. Suddenly, her boyfriend walks on stage with a mic and says, "There's someone really special here tonight, and I want to ask her something life-changing." Everyone gasps. She's tearing up. I'm filming. He gets down on one knee and says, "Will you forgive me for what I did in Miami?" Everyone thought he was joking, but then he starts confessing to cheating on her during a business trip, in front of a full bar, on a mic. He says he wants to come clean and rebuild. She stared at him for a full 10 seconds, then stood up and walked right out. Left her luggage, her friends, everything. She blocked him on everything mid-flight home. That man took a gamble, and Vegas took his entire life. Before we continue, do us a quick favor. Smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. I went to Vegas for my best friend's bachelorette party, and it started out exactly how you'd expect. Bottomless mimosas, hotel selfies, and way too many neon dresses. We stayed at a swanky resort on the club, and on night 1, we got very friendly with the bellhop who helped with our bags. One of the bridesmaids, Jessica, flirted hard, and by midnight they were making out in the rooftop pool. Cool, whatever. We were all drunk and vibing, but by the next morning, Jessica was gone, like fully vanished. No texts, no signs. We were freaking out until hotel security told us she'd gone to a different hotel entirely with the bellhop. She reappears that afternoon in his uniform shirt and nothing else, claiming she's living her truth. Here's the drama. It turns out that the bellhop was already engaged to the bride's cousin, who was flying in the next day for the wedding. Jessica didn't know. Chaos erupts. The bride is sobbing in the hotel lobby, threatening to cancel the whole wedding. The cousin does show up and actually forgives the bellhop and still wants to marry him. Long story short, the wedding went ahead. Jessica wasn't invited, and I can never look at a bellhop the same way again. Story 3. Back in college, a group of us flew to Vegas for spring break. We were broke, reckless, and trying to make memories. I vaguely resembled this up-and-coming YouTuber at the time. And when we got into a club, someone thought I was him. I played along, obviously. Free drinks started coming. A promoter even gave me a VIP booth. Women were taking selfies with me like I was famous. I thought I'd won the simulation. But it spiraled quickly. One woman, absolutely gorgeous, like straight out of a magazine, kept calling me baby and feeding me shots. Next thing I know, I woke up in a hotel room that is not mine, wearing a gold bathrobe that also wasn't mine. Wallet? Gone. Phone? Gone. All I had was a half-eaten chicken wing on the nightstand and a Polaroid of me in a tuxedo, kissing the woman on the cheek. I found out later that night from my friends that I had apparently married her. There were photos, a ring, and worst of all, someone live-streamed part of it thinking I was that damn YouTuber. It took weeks and a very confusing call to a Vegas court clerk to straighten it out. Now, anytime someone says what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, I just laugh and check my finger. Story 4. So, my cousin's boyfriend, let's call him Mike, bragged non-stop about being great at Blackjack, said he studied card counting and could easily walk out with 10K. We didn't believe him, but we were in Vegas, and it was his moment to shine. On night 2, he actually starts winning big, like a few hundred, then a couple grand. At first we were cheering, then he starts getting watched. You know that look security gives people when they're pretending not to watch you. Next thing we know, 2 very large men in suits politely escort him to a back room. We panic, assuming he's getting arrested or something. An hour later, Mike comes out, shaking, white as a ghost, and silent. Turns out, he wasn't counting cards. He was being used, unknowingly, by a small-time crime ring. They'd been slipping him chips to launder money while he thought he was just getting lucky. The guys who took him weren't security, they were casino investigators working with the feds. Mike got off with a warning because they believed he was dumb, not criminal. We flew home the next day. He deleted all his social media. My cousin dumped him 48 hours later. Last I heard, he's a parking lot attendant and won't go near a deck of cards. Story 5. I went to Vegas for a bachelor party. Nothing too wild, just drinks, poker, and a bit of clubbing. On the second night, I got pretty hammered and somehow ended up at a wedding chapel with a woman I just met that afternoon. We thought it'd be hilarious to go through with the ceremony for fun, no paperwork, just a cheesy photo op, or so we thought. Turns out, in our drunken state, we did sign actual documents. We were legally married. I didn't realize it until I got a letter a few weeks later at home from the Nevada Marriage Bureau. I called her immediately, and we both freaked out. Thankfully, she was cool about it. We got it annulled without drama, but it took time and money, and explaining that to my parents and my actual girlfriend at the time, not fun. Story 6. We attended a bachelorette party a week before the wedding. I and a couple of other friends said it was a bad idea. We knew the bride and knew nothing good could come from a Vegas trip, but she really wanted it. Red flag right there. Sure enough, a video was sent to her fiancé of her making out with some random couple at the club we were in, and apparently that's not all that happened. She said that the couple recorded their three-way. Sucks too, because her fiancé was a really sweet guy. She wasn't even drunk either, not that it would make it better, honestly. But she made all these decisions sober, told us to back off and screw ourselves when we tried to get her away from the couple. Story 7. I went out there with some friends from the IE Riverside, and we stayed at the circus. On the last night, a mutual friend made it his mission to procure himself a lady of the night. So, with no phone on him at all, he took off to the club at like 3 a.m. Morning came, and nobody could get hold of him. On the drive back, my homie got a call from him. Apparently, he found a dancer who gave him a $200 hand J. And of course, he didn't have a dime to pay for it. So, the girl's pimp took his truck for Collateral, and he was freaking out. Eventually, he calls his mom to wire him money, but she can't do it until the next day, so he has to stay out there in Vegas for the night. The next morning, he gets the money sent, and he drives back to Riverside. We were still there at a friend's house, so we told the other guy to come through. When he got there, he explained the whole story. At the end, someone asked him, "So you paid $200 for a hand J? Got held against your will, threatened by a pimp, and missed a day of work you couldn't, so you lost your job. Yeah. Was it worth it? Losing all that stuff?" He looked at me like I was from outer space and went, "Wouldn't trade it for anything else in the world." Story 8. The bride and her maid of honor and her 3 bridesmaids all went for a 4-day girls' trip to Vegas. Well, one of the 3 bridesmaids let it slip that the bride maid of honor and one of the bridesmaids all slept with guys they met there. The wedding was called off, and the maid of honor's marriage ended. Story 9. My wife knew this married couple who were just full of drama. Both narcissistic, attention-seeking, putting it all out there on Facebook. Anyway, the wife goes to buy groceries one day and finds there's no money in her account. She checks their bank statements and discovers that their bank account has been emptied by not 1 but 2 trips to that bunny ranch in Nevada. Her husband said he was going on a week's business trip in Vegas. Turns out their credit cards were maxed out as well. When she confronted her husband about this, he first blamed her, saying that she didn't make him feel special when he was leaving for his business trip by not making him a cake. Next, she finds out that he doesn't like her feet, that he went to a club and spent all of their money on the dancers giving him foot massages. So yeah, they got divorced. And the kicker was that she was responsible for half of their debt. So after their divorce, she is still paying for his little week-long trip to Vegas. Story 10. I lived in Vegas and worked VIP security at a property on the club. Most of all, y'all's secrets are safe with me. I have one though, because this guy will never read this. A guy who had $300K in watches stolen from him by a dancer he brought back to his room. She drugged him, and she stole a few of the watches he brought for a trade show. I was new to the job and stood there in disbelief while my supervisor talked him out of calling the cops. He pointed out that the watches were insured but his marriage was not. A police report means a paper trail, and he has to explain to his wife why he has to come back to Vegas to testify in court. He filed a police report, and the Metro showed up, Even Metro PD kind of tried to talk him out of actually filing the report. He still did. A few hours later, we got a frantic call from a maintenance staff member about someone who jumped off the top floor of the parking structure. It was him. They found a note to his boss, who was his father-in-law, his wife, and his kids, in his room. I don't know what it said. As far as I know, they never recovered the watches. So, if you bought a genuine Breitling Omega or Hublot watch for a stupidly low price in Vegas around 2006, it could have been his. Don't pick up a dancer in Vegas. If you do, don't drink anything that isn't sealed first. If you do, use the safe for your valuables. If they're really valuable, many properties will store them for you. We did that often. That didn't stay in Vegas. I remember that guy all the time and don't live anywhere near that cesspool anymore. His family remembers him too, and they didn't live in Vegas. Story 11. My ex insisted on a bachelorette in Vegas before our wedding. I got a panicked call from her sister in the middle of the night that they lost her. My ex because she drank too much and became belligerent. She went off with two of her bridesmaids who also were not answering phones. And the short of it is that those two friends hooked up with random strangers from Vegas that night. My ex claimed she had nothing to do with it, which I believed at the time. Came to realize I was fooling myself. Well, those two friends were both in long-term committed relationships that ended when their Vegas antics were revealed. The rest of the bridal party wouldn't speak to my ex for years after this fiasco because of the fallout. My ex somehow held me responsible for the outcome because I rallied the troops, her sisters, and the remaining non-drunk or non-cheating bridal party members to find them, and called all the nearby hotels and venues where I thought they might be. When I finally found them, they were in the wrong hotel having a standoff with security, which I successfully de-escalated from 3,000 miles away. I was probably pretty full of myself over resolving a situation with my ex without physically being there, since I usually would just throw her over my shoulder and carry her out of whatever situation she got us into, which is why I didn't notice the blatantly obvious cheating and her bridal party kept their mouths shut afterwards. I was in love, and it made me a fool. Story 12. Not me, but my aunt's now ex-boyfriend. He moved out there for a few weeks to build a deck for his mom and sister. Everything seemed fine. Then he started getting dodgy on the phone with my aunt. He invited my mom to come visit him with his aunt. He talked a big game of how much fun the three of them would have. The plan was for them to fly there and drive back together. They show up, and there is nothing ready for their arrival. The mom and sister live in a house owned by a woman, Barbara. My aunt learns that her boyfriend has been having an affair with Barbara and has been living in Barbara's house. Also, no deck is built. My mom wanted to take the Jeep and just drive back with my aunt, leaving the boyfriend there. Instead, they all came back together in one uncomfortable ride. My aunt broke breakup with him. She bought the Jeep but put it in his name so he got to keep it, which sucks. She bought so much for him as she made way more money. He did construction for cash jobs. I later learned this was not the first time he cheated. I had known him since I was a child, and he had been there for us when my dad died. At first, I both missed him and hated him. Now, I just hate him. He lives in Vegas now. Barbara dumped him after a few months. Story 13. Sort of vice versa. When I was 7, I was handcuffed and thrown into a cop car by one of my local officers who my dad knew really well because I was riding my bike without a helmet. He put me in the back of the car, drove me home, hit the sirens and lights at my house, and my dad comes out laughing his butt off when he realizes everything that transpired. Me in the back in handcuffs, sitting in a cop car. I had just turned 21, so my parents and I went out to Vegas to celebrate. I was walking down the street with a beer in hand when this big guy in a Derek Jeter jersey stopped me and said I couldn't be drinking out there. Since I was pretty buzzed, I told him to go screw himself, because as far as I knew it was perfectly legal to drink on the streets in Vegas. Well, apparently, those were the magic words. Next thing I know, he shoved me up against a wall and slapped cuffs on me. Keep in mind, people all around had their phones out, recording everything. He and his partner marched me into Harrah's, still keeping up the act like I was some criminal. It was the same officer who was local and moved to Vegas. I wasn't aware of all of this. And my dad, being the hysterical guy he is, set it up. I came to find out he was undercover, and my dad was giving him our location so that his plan would come to fruition. Story 14. The year was 2011. I was 24 and living in Minneapolis. I had a best friend from high school living in LA, and he often would tell me of his Vegas escapades. One day, when we were catching up via good old G-chat, and he was chatting about the past weekend in Vegas with his friends, and I said, "Screw it, let's plan a trip. I bring my friends, you bring your friends, and we'll do Vegas right." The weekend was planned. It was me, a girl I had just started seeing, and a couple flying in. My buddy, his girlfriend, and her roommates, 3 girls, and his male roommate, so a big combined crew of 10. My good friends and I all worked at an airline, so we could save on flight costs, but slowly leading up to the Friday of said weekend, 2 of them bailed. I was on a work trip leading up to the weekend, so I was flying into Vegas from a different city. The girl I just started seeing was on an aircraft from Minneapolis that had a landing gear issue, and the flight was pulled back to the gate and canceled. Flying as an employee on standby, you aren't given any rebooking priority, so she couldn't reroute and had to cancel. It ended up just being me that flew in. The first night was all out. Pre-gaming, little gambling, walking the club, Caesar's nightclub, powders, lots of fun till 4 a.m. One of my friend's girlfriend's roommates and I hit it off and ended up hooking up. Same thing the next night. Flights out of Vegas were terrible to jump on Sunday, so I ended up driving with the group to LA and flying out of there. I sat next to and was talking with the girl I hooked up with for hours on that drive. I flew back and came clean to the girl I had just started seeing. I ended up doing long distance with the LA girl for 1.5 years before we lived in the same city. Been with her ever since, a total of 14 years, married for 8 now with 2 young boys, a dog and a cat. What happened in Vegas didn't stay in Vegas. I married what happened in Vegas. Story 15. A guy I knew went on a bachelor party years back. He was the youngest attendant, having just turned 21, took a relatively small amount of money to gamble with, but blew all his money in the first couple of days. One of the older guys offered to spot him for the 3rd night. He went on an insane blackjack run and walked away with close to $250,000. He went on to have an absolute ball the last 2 days, you name it, fancy watch, designer clothes, and VIP access, courtesy of the casino. He went wild, and when he got back to the UK, with almost 150k pounds, he was threatened by the guy that lent him the money that he'd tell his family or something like that if he didn't give him half, despite the fact some of his immediate family were actually on the trip. Mr. Bankroll got a good chunk of change, but was told to back off after that. Anyway, dude slept with a bottle girl, having taken a fair amount of party favors, got an STD, and got his brother in trouble for not looking after him. He asked his dad about it when we were watching the football one night at theirs, and he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I've never been prouder." Story 16. I went on a guy's trip. We had a blast doing all the usual stuff. At some point, we rolled into a dance club. During the afternoon, we were about the only ones in there, so the girls all mobbed us. I'm pretty cynical, but damned if a gorgeous 6-foot-tall tattooed dancer didn't take an immediate liking to me. I'm 5'10". I even said, "Hey, you should meet my friend R over here. I think you'd like him," but she didn't budge from my side. Anyway, she proceeded to take her top off and give me an extended dance in the public area, all while telling me how handsome I was and the nasty things she wanted to do to me. I didn't even think about the Nokia phone in my pocket. While she was dancing on me, the phone dialed the last called number, a girl I was dating back home, and left a 3-minute voicemail. Now we had only hung out a few times, and in my mind it wasn't serious. She wasn't even the only one, but she thought we were in a relationship and she was pissed. Anyway, I figured in for a penny, in for a pound, so I extended my trip for a day to bang this dancer. It was glorious. Story 17. I used to go to Vegas every year for a trade show. The first year I went, I was 18. You can book a hotel there unless you are 21. I found a website that let me book a room at a hotel off the club that said 18 plus to book. So, I booked a room online. I flew down. It was my first time flying, my first time really going anywhere on my own. I didn't really know anyone, and it was just me for my business. I had started. I still laugh. My mom was just like, "Have fun." I showed up at this run-down hotel. The front desk had bars and bulletproof glass. The guy asked for my ID. "Oh, you're only 18? We can book rooms for anyone under 21. Then he looked over and saw I had paid in full for a week, and he said, "Oh, you're all paid up. Here's the key." The room had bullet holes in the wall, and what appeared to be blood stains on the carpet. Absolute worst hotel I have ever stayed in. I had to stay for the full week, slept on top of the blankets in my clothes each night. Luckily, nothing too terrible happened, but what an experience for an 18-year-old on their own for the first time. Fortunately, I stayed in better hotels the other 9 years I went. I came home with about 1,000 of those dancer cards they hand out in the club for my friends. I will never forget the guy waving the cards yelling, "Chicks with dongs." Story 18. I went out in LA with some friends for what was supposed to be just a few beers. The next morning, I woke up in bed next to an attractive woman, with no memory of how I got there. I pulled back the curtains and, to my absolute confusion, was greeted by the bright lights of Vegas. Apparently, in our drunken brilliance, we'd rented a car, driven all the way to Vegas, met a hen party, and decided to tag along with them for the weekend. And no, before you ask, it wasn't the bride I ended up sharing a room with. Come Monday, we returned the rental car to LA. The guy at the counter looked it over, no scratches, no dents, nothing. He even said my English accent made him feel confident we were responsible drivers. Truthfully, we had no business being behind the wheel. Since then, I've never gotten near a car after even a sip of alcohol. In fact, I've been sober for the last 13 years. Story 19. Pretty much ended my friendship, actually. That happened twice. First instance, I woke up from a blackout at somebody's house. They lived off the club and their roommate was kicking me out because my friends got into a fight with their friends. However, by the time I got back to the hotel, I was locked out and this one dude I know didn't get up to open the door even though he was awake. So, I ended up sleeping against the door to the hotel room. The second instance, as girl that I had brought ended up sleeping with one of my friends. He was not into her, and let her down. She then thrashed the hotel room, and made up some lie that some guys broke into the hotel room and essayed her. I pointed out this was an obvious lie, and that if it were true she would have called the cops. She was so embarrassed that she just caught a flight home and never spoke to me again. Story 20. One of my coworkers went to Vegas to have a weekend tryst with a C-list celebrity she met in Hollywood a couple of weeks prior. He became obsessed with her and threatened to ruin her life. She was engaged to a pediatrician if he couldn't have her. The celebrity finds her fiancé's clinic address and contact information and has his goons tell him about her infidelity. They broke up after 11 years together, and the celebrity ghosted her. He just did it out of spite. Story 21. I was in the Venetian playing roulette with my wife, and in walks this crowd of drunk early 20s frat guys. I quickly picked up that it was one of said guy's 23rd birthday, and he was down to his last $100. He puts it on black. It hits. Now he's got $200, and he wants to walk away, but his friends are egging him on, so he lets it ride. Hits again. Now he has $400. The table is growing loud as he lets it ride again, then $800. At this point, stuff is getting exciting. He puts the $800 on red, and it hits again, $1,600. Now it's getting really loud, and the other frat guys are all like, "Just let it ride, dude." This guy puts the $1,600 on number 23. I think that was higher than the table max, because the pit boss came over to approve it, and obviously approved it. I covered my face with my hands. I knew what it would feel like to lose a free $1,600 as a 23-year-old, and was picturing the devastation. The wheel spins, and 23. It was a $56,000 payout, if I remember correctly. Let me tell you, that table was freaking pandemonium. They did leave after that, and I presume had a fun night. Story 22. Years ago, and not long out of law school, I was in court for a case against opposing counsel whom I had gone to law school with and her paralegal. I had met the paralegal once just in passing. I lost and I exchanged pleasantries with both women, and I headed to the airport for a family member's Vegas wedding. That night, we finished the rehearsal dinner at the Venetian, and I go walking around, just people watching, a little gambling, and drinking. Headed back to my room at the Bellagio, and I heard my name sort of screeched. I spin, and it's opposing counsel's paralegal, and she's sprinting at me. throws her arms around me, and long story short, she too was in Vegas for her sister's wedding and left court for the airport. We chat, no biggie. I head up to my room as she and her bridesmaid friends are going out. It's 3 a.m. when there's a knock at the door. I open it. It's her. She walks in without a word, kicks off her heels, crawls into my bed, curls up, and passes out almost instantly. I pull a blanket over her and take the other bed. Around 7 a.m., I wake up to the sound of the shower running. There's a little pile on the floor, black dress, thigh highs, underwear. I quietly fold them and lie back down. A few minutes later, she comes out wrapped in a towel and sits on the edge of the bed. I ask if she remembers how she got there. She nods. She'd gone out drinking, even though she rarely does, and ended up completely out of it. They hit a bar, and at some point, the other girls took off without her. One of them had her phone too, supposedly checking something. She had no idea where she was, didn't know the name of the hotel she was staying in since her cousin had booked it, but she remembered seeing me at the Bellagio. So, she just started walking, followed the fountains, and somehow found her way to my hotel. Talked the front desk into giving her my room number, and there she was. She thanked me for letting her crash, for not asking questions. Then she asked if she could borrow a shirt, some shorts, maybe a pair of pool shoes, and if I could give her a ride back to her hotel. So, I got her some coffee, walked her to the car, and took her home. I get home several days later and go back to work. On my desk in a FedEx box with my shirt, shorts, shoes, a $50 bill, and a "What Happens in Vegas Stays in Vegas" cheesy shirt with a note that said she appreciated everything, along with info on reservations at a restaurant and her number. And that dinner was my and my ex-wife's first date. Story 23. It was the summer of 2010, a boys' trip. There were 5 of us, all just looking to let loose. On the second night, we got pretty drunk enough that I didn't even realize I'd left my wallet in the cab on the way to a club. We tried sneaking into a spot with a laid-back bar on the first floor and a wild nightclub upstairs. No luck, the bouncer was checking wristbands. And without my wallet, I couldn't get one. So, I stayed downstairs while one of my buddies kept running back and forth between floors, checking in on me and grabbing me a drink or two along the way. Around 3 in the morning, this group of girls walked in, and that's when I saw her. The most beautiful girl I'd ever laid eyes on. While her friends settled at the table next to us, she was the only one swaying gently to the music, kind of dancing on her own. I asked her to dance. We talked for about 20 minutes, and before we parted ways, I got her number. She was from Los Angeles. I was living up in Northern California. Despite the distance, we made it work. We did the long-distance thing for nearly 2 years before I decided to take the leap and move to LA. Now, we've been married for almost 11 years. We've got 2 amazing kids, 2 dogs, and a lifetime of beautiful memories to look back on. So, my wallet stayed in Vegas, but I ended up taking home a whole family. Story 24. It's kinda a real-life How I Met Your Mother story. 2010 bachelor party. We were 5 dudes, and 2 of them were married. 1 was in a long-term relationship, and 1 was single. On the second night, we hired a few dancers to visit us at the house we rented. Both were 10-10 and great at keeping the party going. I took a liking to one of them, and she seemed to reciprocate. But I'm paying, and she has to. It was her job. About 2 hours in, one of our guys had disappeared. I went upstairs to find him, passed out in bed. As I was leaving the suite, the dancer was there. She made a pass at me and wanted to take a shower together. I asked how much. She said to put something extra in the tip. So to the shower we went. 10 minutes later, the whole party burst into the bathroom to see us going at it. We call it a night. A few hours later, I woke up to a text from her, asking how long we are staying. She wants to get together the next day. I'm thinking, boy am I a sucker, and how much is this going to cost me? Maybe a kidney. I ditch the guys and go hang out across. She pays for dinner. We go have a few drinks before she goes to work. We text through most of the night. The guys are eating it up. We fly out the next day around noon. She and I go to brunch. There is clear chemistry, but I am still skeptical. A few months later, I visited Vegas a few times, ended my relationship, and seemed to be dating her. Still don't have 100% confidence or belief in everything, but the trips to Vegas were fun and we got into every club. Fast forward 15 years, and we've been married for 12 years with 2 planned kids together. She moved to my city about a year after we met. Didn't want to dance anymore, said it was a phase, and made the money she needed to make. She got a job until we had kids and became a stay-at-home mom. She's never looked back. We dabbled in but she really didn't embrace it like she thought she would. So now, she lives a normal life, is involved in the school and community, and runs a small online business. Suffice it to say, we don't tell people how we met. We say it was at a Vegas conference, and the guys are sworn to secrecy. I suspect they have told their wives, but it's so far in the past that no one cares. So, what happened in Vegas finally left Vegas and became my wife. Story 25. I met Shawn Michaels at a restaurant once. We'd accidentally been given his table. Apparently, he was fond of the restaurant and had a specific table he liked, and the management had messed up and gotten their days wrong. It was Tuesday, and they thought he was coming on Thursday or something like that. Anyway, the manager, completely embarrassed, this is a pretty nice restaurant, comes by and says, "I'm so sorry, but we'd like to move you to another table if you could be troubled, and we'll gladly compensate you for the cost of the meal and any other meal you'd like while you're in town." My sister and cousin were both like, "Yeah, that's cool," and I kind of played the jerk a bit. "I'm sorry, I just don't understand. We've been here for 15 minutes, and we've just ordered, can we finish our meal here?" Then out of nowhere, Shawn Michaels shows up next to the manager and says, "Paul, these guys can finish. We'll be at the bar. I've got some time." And I, being a big HBK fan, said, "Oh wow, I had no idea. Please feel free to give them the table." Shawn was grateful, shook my hand and said thanks, then gave me a card with his number on it and told me to give him a call later. After working up the nerve, I gave him a call that night. And to make a long story short, we had a glorious 11-month love affair, man on man, that I shall never forget. Our bodies intertwined as one, and from the beauty of Morocco to the French Riviera, to the snorkeling in the Galapagos, Shawn Michaels and I made glorious love to each other on 6 of the 7 continents. Story 26. In February 2023, I was 20 at the time, and my parents stopped at the Luxor Hotel to see the Titanic exhibit before we headed to the airport. In the parking garage at the Luxor Hotel, I found 4 unopened cans of White Claws and stashed them in the rental car. After we were done seeing the exhibit, I managed to slam all 4 cans in under 20 minutes. As a matter of fact, I used one of the cans to wash down my medication, so I had to go through airport security while pretending to be sober. Another story is when I was 15 years old. My parents wanted to play cards at one of the casinos in Vegas before we hopped on our flight, and I went out to the parking lot to go to the car to charge my phone before we got on the plane. I saw 2 older women smoking in the parking lot, and they asked me if I wanted to have a hit off a joint, so one of them passed me an unlit joint. I put it in my mouth, and as she lights it, she ends up burning about 8 inches of my hair off with a torch. Needless to say, I had to get a haircut after that, and on top of that I had to go through airport security smelling like pot, burnt hair, and my dad's cologne. Story 27. I was in the USAF at the time doing aircraft maintenance. They shut our runway down for 2 months to tear it up and lay down a new one. So, they sent us to March ARB, California. The squadron said you could drive down there if you had a legit reason. I lied and said that I had family around there. So, I ended up getting to drive. A friend went with me, and I took all the mountain bikes from our mountain biking group so we could ride there. This was 2001, and Warped Tour was in Vegas while we were in California. So, we went. We went out on Friday and arrived around noon. We went straight to it. Hot summer, as we shut down in June and July. We didn't eat anything. We didn't take water or get any water while we were there. We just hopped from concert to concert. We got back to the hotel at 1 a.m., went straight to the hotel bar. I started with a Long Island, then we all got a beer. Then we all took a shot of tequila. I felt fine until I stood up from the bar stool. Everything went crazy. My legs were rubber, but I stayed on my feet. We got back to the hotel room and decided to do dares. First, run to the closest pool, jump in and run back. We all got away with that. Next, run to the first pool, Run in, find a piece of trash, jump in the second pool, and run back. We did this in pairs, so the other two that went with me went first. I was leaning on the wall to stand by now. After a few minutes, one friend returned panicked. Oh crap, don't answer the door. A few seconds later, bam bam bam. Security, open up. The security guy says we need to be out by checkout. I got the full story the next day. So, they got to the first pool. They went out but couldn't find a piece of trash on the sidewalks. They gave up and ran to the second pool. Only security was waiting. They told them the pool was closed while it said open 24 hours, and they argued that it wasn't. They bolted. One friend was really hardcore into Aikido in his youth, and was really agile. He did some ninja crap, and got up to the second story without using the stairs. So, security couldn't follow him. The other guy was not so nimble, and security followed him to our room. The entire trip was really fun. I learned a lot of various bike skills during that trip. Got to see Warped Tour, and I think I still have a sample CD somewhere from it from a band that was just starting out. Story 28. I spent my entire birthday week in Vegas with my ex and our mutual friend, occasionally meeting up with one of my own friends too. We all knew each other from gaming online, so it wasn't weird at all. We had an absolute blast. Did all the usual Vegas stuff, gambled, drank, ate way too well, and soaked it all in. I was 27 years old at the time. On our last night there, the four of us decided to hit up a club to wrap the trip up right. While two dancers were arguing over seating in the wrong section, my friend confided in me that he and our friend had been hooking up for months. She saw it as a fun fling, but he was completely head over heels for her. My ex and I tried to talk to him about how it was a bad idea, especially since he's unemployed, barely attending school, and all of the future plans he had depended on asking favors from his extended family. But he wouldn't listen. He just kept saying he loved her. Well, after asking me to make out and hooking up with a dancer in the bathroom, she left not long after in an Uber where she also slept with the driver. My friend eventually found out, though to her credit she told him herself, and I had to talk him down from a drunken panic attack during our ride back to the hotel. We tried to talk some sense into him, but he wouldn't hear it. He says he can't stand her husband, hates that she goes home to him, can't even look at the guy. He says he loves her and would give her anything. She came clean to her husband not long after, since their marriage is open. They have 3 children, and she's a fully dependent stay-at-home mom because of them. Her husband provides everything, and they've been together since high school. It got to the point where my friend's neediness was suffocating her, so she made him take a break. But even a year later, he's still convinced she'll leave her husband for him. The truth is, even if she did, he couldn't support her at all, and her husband would still be involved because of the kids. Who knows though, maybe once he's no longer a jobless student, his dream of stepping into the role of stepfather of 3 in an open marriage he clearly can't handle will come true. But she's made it very clear that she will not give that up. Story 29. I went to Vegas with my small tech company for an industry show, snoozing through client events each evening. Around 2 a.m., as I was heading to my room, my CEO waved me over to his blackjack table where he was up a decent stack of chips. We played through several hands, with him teaching me his method. Then we moved to the poker table, followed by craps, and finally roulette. By almost sunrise, his pile of chips had attracted a few working girls looking to help the winners celebrate. He gave them money to leave us alone, but not before asking if I wanted one. My sense was that he was an honest guy testing me. He knew I was married. A year later, when it came time to assign me a lot more responsibility and opportunity, he said my refusal that night was one of the factors. It's not just drunken stupidity that happens there. Story 30. I went to Vegas with my brother in January. It was a quiet day until we got blackout drunk. A dancer asked if I wanted some company, and I started yelling at her. Suddenly, the pimp was on top of me, hitting me. My brother kicked him in the head. The pimp rolled over my 40-ounce and got cut up badly. Then the dancer pepper sprayed us. The cops showed up, and I had blood all over me. I thought, great, AIDS. The cops asked if we wanted to press charges, but we said no. I ended up breaking 2 fingers. We went back to Circus after that. At the time, I was pretty broke. I went back to work with broken fingers, taped them up since I had health insurance. My fingers are still messed up to this day. I was recently in Vegas with my wife and teens, told my kids the story, and they just laughed. Story 31. After a few too many cocktails, I volunteered at a magic show in Vegas. My only job was to step into the box and wave to the audience. Easy enough, right? Well, the trapdoor malfunctioned, and I ended up stuck under the stage for half the show. No one even noticed I hadn't come back out. I had to army crawl backstage in heels and a sparkly dress. The worst part, the whole thing made it onto TikTok. Now I'm forever known as Box Girl, in a corner of magic show fail compilations. Story 32. I went out to Vegas for a Super Bowl party back in 2015. I stayed for 4 days, but honestly, I don't recommend staying that long. On the second day, our group was hopping between clubs and casinos. I parked myself at a $1 slot machine and played for almost 3 hours while a very sweet cocktail waitress kept the gin and tonics coming. By 2:45 in the morning, the rest of my crew had called it a night, so I was left alone. I finished my 12th drink. At least. I only know that because we ran into the same waitress on day 3, and she told me how many she'd given me. I started heading back to Paris, where I was staying. Just as I reached the elevator, my stomach rumbled and my brain shouted, "We need food." So, I stumbled down the hall to a little pizza by the slice stall. As I was heading back to the elevator with my slices, a very attractive red-headed woman was walking the other way. I used to be a massive flirt no matter the situation. So I hit the brakes and asked, "Which way are you going?" She laughed and said, "Same way you are," then started walking with me. We got up to my room and she took off her jacket, sitting down on the edge of the bed. We talked for maybe 3 minutes before I realized she was working. I apologized and explained that I thought she was a tourist like me. She was modestly dressed and my drunk brain didn't pick up on anything else. I told her I wasn't interested in paying for a fun night. She clicked her tongue and said, "Too bad. You're cuter than most of my customers, and I think we'd have a good time." I asked if I owed her anything for her time. She smiled and said, "No, honey. It was nice just getting to chat for a bit." Then my drunk brain kicked in and I blurted, "You want some pizza?" She laughed and reached out for a slice. We ate pizza and talked for about 10 minutes before she left. Not exactly a wild Vegas story, but it still makes me laugh every now and then, even years later. Story 33? A guy I worked with went to Vegas with his buddies. They're from the UK. When he got back, he told me this wild tale. One of the guys hit it off with a woman who was widely assumed to be a lady of the night, and they disappeared off to his hotel room. The next morning, he was nowhere to be found at breakfast. As the day went on, the rest of the group got worried because no one could reach him. They called the police and hospitals, but there was no sign. Later that evening, their buddy showed up. He'd been in the hospital. Apparently, there was some kind of altercation in the hotel room that left him badly beaten. No payment? Pimp involved? Nobody really knows, but the room was reportedly covered in blood. He said the casino had called an ambulance and booked him in under the name Trauma Fred, which is why no one could locate him earlier. When they went back to the hotel room, it was spotless, like nothing had happened. Apparently, casinos take these things very seriously and clean up discreetly to avoid bad publicity and keep business running smoothly. Story 34. The owner of the club I worked at took everyone with at least 1 year of employment on a trip every year. I got to go to Vegas 1 year, but other years my day job kept me from attending. So there we were in Vegas, and the bouncers and I decided to walk the club scene. We'd stop by a casino, grab a few drinks, then head down the street. At one point, we found ourselves at the Mirage, sitting by a water feature that looked like a jungle. The head bouncer glanced across the table at a guy nobody liked but tolerated, and asked if for $100 he'd jump to the edge, give a Tarzan yell, and leap into the pool. I said, "Put your money on the table." The guy we didn't like was absolutely not going to do it. So I looked at Dan and said, "I'll do it." He should have known better than to put that challenge in front of a lunatic like me. I called the waitress over and asked for security. Within 30 seconds, we had a crew of them around us. The head guy asked what was up, and I asked if I did the jump, would they throw me in jail or just kick me out? He asked if I was a guest there. I said no. He said they'd just escort me out. I was like, "Really?" He laughed and said, "I said do it for $100. So I grabbed the money, ran to the edge, let out a Tarzan yell, jumped in, splashed around, looked at him and said, "Let's go." He and the three guys escorting me out laughed the whole way to the door. I thanked them, waited for my buddies to come out, and down the club we went. Story 35. I used to go to the Consumer Electronics Show every year. The day after the show, the airport was always absolute chaos, with everyone trying to get home. One year, I was flying Southwest, and when I checked in, the terminal offered me an upgrade for $40 extra. It included a better seat and priority boarding. I figured, why not? It turned out that the upgrade also gave me access to the priority security line. After checking my bag and turning the corner, I saw the regular security line. It was massive. Easily 2,000 people, snaking around the mall area of the terminal multiple times. My flight was in just 60 minutes. Thanks to the upgrade, I cut through almost the entire line, walked straight up to the priority security, and got to my gate with 40 minutes to spare. Without that upgrade, I definitely wouldn't have made my flight. Honestly, I think that was the luckiest I've ever gotten in Vegas. Story 36. For me, one thing really did stay in Vegas: my personal laptop. It happened on my last trip there a couple of years ago for a destination wedding. I was trying to help my octogenarian mom through airport security and got distracted right when I should have put my laptop back in my bag. I didn't realize it was missing until months later. Since 2020, I've been working from home on a faster work computer with a big 27-inch monitor, so I hardly needed my laptop. When I finally noticed it was gone, I figured it was way too late to find it in Lost and Found. Eventually, I'll buy a new one and restore most of my artwork and media from backups. Luckily, nothing urgent was lost. In the meantime, my phone handles most of the tasks my laptop used to do when I'm traveling. Story 37. So, get this. I was delivering a package to a very prominent business mogul in the club. Turns out, he wasn't the only one who wanted what I was carrying. I got shot in the head. Woke up in some doctor's office with some brain damage and a serious hankering for revenge. I followed this guy all over Nevada, and eventually found out he was literally just a block away from where I was supposed to deliver the package anyway. I made my way into the casino, and just let me tell you, I offed the guy, right there in the casino. Havoc ensued, but I made it out. I found out my client was a bad dude. Like a really bad dude. Definitely wanted to find someone else to pawn this thing off on. Local authorities seemed really sympathetic to my situation, but they needed help badly. Some disgusting fascists were trying to take the city by force, and they weren't going to cut it on their own. So, I gathered as many allies as I could. Some old weirdos obsessed with aviation, some Elvis impersonators who ran their own gang, a beautiful lesbian who grew up in a tech cult, and an old war dog who had retired but couldn't stand to let these suckers win. And we got him. We rushed the Hoover Dam like our lives depended on it, which they did. We won that battle, and things started to settle down in Vegas. But after the whole ordeal, an old colleague from my courier days got really salty. He wasn't happy with the fascists trying to take the club, but for some reason, this dude had a real hate for liberal democracy. So, I had to go on a whole other tiring journey to stop that a-hole and make sure he couldn't nuke Vegas. The guy kept going on about the bear and the bull, the bear and the bull, and to be honest, I ended up just capping him and heading back to recuperate. I'm tired. But everyone across the West Coast keeps talking about me like I'm some kind of legend or something. I just want to grill, man. Story 38. Not from misbehaving, but it happened to me when I was there. I went there with a group of people for a men's league, beer league level hockey tournament, sharing a room with our team captain. I spent the evening with another friend bouncing around a few places in the club, but nothing too wild because we had a game in the morning. The team captain was still awake when I got to the room, spoke briefly about our days, and we both went to sleep, and he never woke up. Natural, because, so far as I know, as he wasn't into any substances, but it screwed me up, knowing a friend just died right beside me, and I was the last person he spoke to. Really made me hope I didn't miss any signs of distress. I felt awful for a long time after. Still do in a way. Story 39. So, my friends and I went to my buddy's bachelor party. We live in LA and drove down to Vegas. The groom-to-be, Doug, got us access to a classic Mercedes owned by his future father-in-law. 4 of us went: Alan, Doug, Stu, and me. We arrived and checked into Caesar's Palace. I decided to upgrade to the villa on the top floor. After we got changed, we headed out to the roof, took a few shots, and said a few words. After that, all I remember is going out for a steak dinner, and then waking up on the floor of our room, which was completely trashed. Alan was in the bathroom screaming because, apparently, we had stolen a tiger. Then, out of nowhere, we found a baby in the closet. But Doug was nowhere to be found. We checked everywhere and assumed he had gone down to the pool. We went to check there, but no luck. So, we decided to pick up the car, but instead of getting our Mercedes, they brought us a cop car. Weird, right? It turned out we had taken it from some officers who eventually tracked us down. They only let us go after using us to demonstrate tasers on. Next, we found the baby's mother, a dancer who it turned out Stu had married the night before. We had no idea what was going on at this point. We went back to the room and standing there, I'm not even joking, was Mike Tyson singing Phil Collins. He punched Alan in the face and told us we needed to bring his tiger back. So, we tracked down the Mercedes, but then an unclothed Chinese man jumped out of the trunk and beat us with a crowbar before running off into the city. So, we knocked out the tiger and put it in the car, but it woke up and trashed the vehicle. We ended up pushing it back to Tyson's place, where he showed us some security footage of Doug to help us track him down. We drove back into the city, really worried because Doug's wedding was the next day. Then, out of nowhere, a massive SUV slammed into us, and two Asian guys dragged us out of the car. It turned out that unclothed Chinese man from before was actually a mob boss or something. He told us we owed him $80,000 and that he had Doug kidnapped. We tried to chase after him, but he drove off before we could catch him. We looked everywhere for the money but couldn't find it, so Alan decided we could count cards to win it back. Stu put up $10,000 as a bet. Alan was a stumbling idiot the whole time, but somehow he managed to win us the money. Honestly, I don't know how he did it since he was holding us back the entire time. Anyway, we went to exchange the money for cash, but when they gave us the money, it wasn't him, the Chinese mob boss. Annoyed, we asked for the money back, but the mob boss just left. Then Stu remembered where we left Doug on the roof of the hotel. We sped back and finally found him up there. With only 3 hours before the wedding and no flights available, we decided to drive. We sped back to LA, and just as we were running out of time, the tuxedo van pulled up beside us to hand over our suits. Finally, we made it home with seconds to spare, and Doug got married. After the wedding, Alan found his camera, and we looked through the photos. A lot happened, and honestly, I think this story might be followed up with some lengthy prison sentences. Story 40. It's possible that I inadvertently helped a suspect evade the police last year, but honestly, I still have no idea. We were staying at the Tuscany one night, coming back from Sphere after a Dead & Company show. My parents were supposed to meet me in the lobby to pick up some things my mom had left in my husband's and my room. I headed out of our building to walk over to the lobby building. There was a guy who looked like he was coming into our building, so I just held the door for him as I exited. I assumed he hadn't found his key yet or something, so I held the door out of politeness. But looking back, I'm not sure how long he had been standing there waiting to get in. I met up with my mom, came back to the building, and took the elevator upstairs, and the guy was still lingering in the hallway. That felt weird. About 15 minutes later, my husband and I left the building again to pick up some food that was being delivered to the lobby. When we stepped outside, we saw a police officer talking to 2 other guests in front of a nearby building. Then, a helicopter flew overhead, casting a searchlight over the property. We reached the lobby, and outside in the parking lot were multiple police cars. A guy screaming at the top of his lungs, definitely messed up on powder, and a crowd of people watching the chaos. Eventually, our delivery driver was allowed in and handed over our food. She said a cop told her they were searching for someone on the property. When we got back to our building, the random guy was still hanging out in the hallway. Throughout all of this, we were still coming down from the powder we took at the show earlier. We decided we didn't want to talk to the police, so we just let it go. It was hard to tell paranoia from good sense with the way we were feeling. We didn't want to waste the police's time, or ours. To this day, we have no idea what happened or who the police were searching for or why. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, Be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.